Bob, why don't you tell us just a bit about your background and the Cleveland Foundation?
Sure, Doug. The Cleveland Foundation is the oldest and one of the largest community foundations in the United States, and I had the privilege of working there for a number of years, starting in doing some of the health grants, because my background's actually in community health and public health. So I was originally a grantee of the foundation and then got hired to move over and do the health grants, and over time got promoted up to executive vice president.
Good, thanks. We're focusing today on the role of the nonprofit CEO as his or her organization's chief innovator. Would you tell us about 3 or 4 innovation initiatives, really big ones you've observed that truly innovative CEOs have spearheaded over the years? Give us a sense of some of the most notable innovations you've seen from nonprofit CEOs.
Well, you know, that's an interesting question. I guess I would say that over the years as a funder, you see, you know, a lot of ideas come from nonprofit CEOs, and a number, I think, have been truly innovative. A number of them really involve building partnerships, and perhaps partnerships that would be unusual. So one that the Cleveland Foundation funded a few years ago was a partnership between 2 universities to essentially put in place a new medical school in Cleveland focused on the underserved population. So here you had a Cleveland State University located in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio Medical College located quite a ways out, coming together to create an urban-focused medical school that would really deal with both healthcare needs in the inner city and trying to help diversify the pipeline so that more minority and underserved students might be able to qualify for careers in the health professions. So really innovative that 2 institutions could figure out how to kind of jointly hire and jointly put in place you know, something as complex as a medical school. So that's one example. I guess I'd also talk a little bit about, you know, in the arts, the work of the Cleveland Orchestra to deal with declining and aging audiences, and the sense that perhaps this would require a real out-of-the-box solution. And the innovation there was developing both new relationships in Europe that supported touring in Europe in a different way, but also reaching out to Miami and developing a season in Miami which had a concert hall but not an orchestra of the level and background of the Cleveland Orchestra. And again, pretty innovative solution rather than just let's try to raise more money in Cleveland or let's try to just sell more tickets in Cleveland. Since then, they've also gone on and done some other really innovative work, like testing a model that's more of a membership model than a ticket model, so where people pay a membership to the Cleveland Orchestra and then are able to purchase heavily discounted tickets as a member. So that would be, you know, one in the arts. I think in education, we've seen a number of highly creative, innovative approaches to deal with challenges that the Cleveland Municipal School District faced, including taking on kind of the redesign of a number of the large traditional high schools and dividing them up into maybe 2 or 3 different schools in one building. So we have, you know, schools focused on health careers, schools focused on IT, schools focused on kind of more traditional, if you will, vocational education, but all kind of breaking up the model, the monolithic big high school, and putting in place kind of highly creative principles within kind of a very large building. So I think those are some examples of innovation that I'd point to, Doug.
And very impressive examples, to be sure. Bob, as you think over your years as a senior executive at the Cleveland Foundation, what do you consider the most important attributes of public and nonprofit CEOs who successfully spearheaded major innovation? What are some traits that strike you as most important?
Well, I think one is recognizing that innovation is difficult work, and that, if it was easy, it would get done. And so I think that, there's kind of a certain tenacity that an innovative CEO brings to the work. We often talk about, is anyone waking up at 2 in the morning worrying about this? Because if you don't have that tenacity, the first time you hit a barrier, it's easy to back away. So that would be one. I think, innovative CEOs need to recognize that that the real work is in implementation rather than idea generation. And, a lot of people can come up with great ideas, but how do you really carry it forward? And I think sometimes people think an innovative person is a person who comes up with great ideas, and I would say an innovative person is a person who comes up with great ideas and then actually can get them implemented. So that would be a second attribute. And I think a third attribute is an innovative leader is someone who inspires people to do something new and different. Innovation often means change, and change is difficult for many people. If you're not an inspiring leader, it's easy for people to, just complain about the fact that we're being forced to make all these changes, et cetera, et cetera. So those are probably 3 attributes that I've really seen in people who I would put as high on the innovation scale.
Now, we've talked about attributes. Let's look at another aspect of change. Challenges, barriers. Over the years, what have you seen as some of the most significant barriers to accomplishing innovation that innovative leaders have to cope with, have to overcome?
Sure. Well, Doug, I think, going back to the attribute one, obviously having a strategy to overcome resistance to change is a critical piece. I think we're well beyond the command and control model of leadership, where a leader can just say, this is, I'm the leader, so this is what has to happen. And so I think that, leaders who don't understand that and don't know how to motivate people to deal with change, tend to fail. They tend to put grandiose ideas out there and not really realize that there are a lot of people who have just enough power to make something fail, and that can run from the top of the organization down to the very bottom in kind of a structural chart. So I think that's probably the number one piece. A second piece, I think, is really not taking the time to build an understanding on the part of the board as to why change is essential, so that the board really believes in it, and not just believes in it, but begins to understand, therefore, what different skills might be necessary on the board if this is the direction the organization is going. Maybe there are ways that a board can help bring people on who understand the challenges of culture in an organization that's undergoing change. So I think that's probably another challenge, is not really aligning how you think of the board with the change that needs to take place in the organization.
Now, Bob, you've been involved for years in the funding of innovative initiatives, principally in the greater Cleveland area. Generally speaking, what do you think foundations can do to foster the innovative capacity of public and nonprofit organizations? What are some steps that you've seen really work from the funder's perspective?
Well, I guess I'd answer that with two or three ideas, Doug. I think one is that funders can lower the risk of failure. You know, a lot of people talk about that foundation money is money that can be used to, you know, try something new, try something risky. Sometimes foundations say that but don't really understand what risks are involved. But I think if they do it correctly, they can lower the risk of failure by letting an innovative leader try something. The second, I think, is that foundations can tolerate some failure as well. Again, I was always struck by the fact that foundations talk about being in the risk-taking business, but sometimes by the time a grant's made, it feels like all the risk has been washed out of the proposal, so that, you know, every T's been crossed and I has been dotted. And I think that foundations need to have some degree of comfort with risk, whether that's in a general way or if they have some kind of special innovation pool, which I've sometimes seen foundations do to do higher risk kinds of grants. And I guess the third thing I would say is, you know, obviously developing a high degree of openness and candor with your grantees so that they have every belief and incentive to see you as a partner, and to come to you with problems with the understanding that it won't be held against them, that, you know, their openness to share their challenges and their problems is welcomed by the funder and is encouraged by the funder, as opposed to somehow will be subtly used against them in the future, where, you know, they have to worry that going to a funder and saying, we've struggled to make this work, that should be an open and good conversation, as opposed to one that you should have to worry about that the funder will say, well, they're failing at this effort.
Well, folks, we've been hearing from the recently retired Executive Vice President of the Cleveland Foundation about his experience in fostering creative change among nonprofit and public grantees. Bob, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to share your thought-provoking ideas on this very, very important subject. You have a good day, and thanks much.